Well, I got my Sapphire Plus yesterday and I started building it. I've watched every video in English that I can find on the thing and got partway through and was not happy with the results. Starting out on the Z brackets for the for the bed, excuse me. I'm not a big YouTube person, but I just figured this needed to be said. So I started looking at other things, and one of the videos I saw stated that the power supply was not grounded. So I decided to check this out as well. What you'll find is if you touch the ground coming in from your power plug and your machine, you should get continuity. And I've done this, don't get any continuity. There's a spot on my base that is scratched or whatnot, and I went ahead and checked there. What does this mean? Well, what this really means, and many of you probably know this, but I'm sure there are a lot of you that don't know this. If your machine isn't grounded, if your power supply is not grounded to the base and frame of your machine, and a positive line ends up coming in contact with that base, but no negative. Well, now because you're not grounded, if you touch that frame, you now have the potential of being that voltage's path to ground, meaning you get an electric shock. So I can't remember which YouTuber it was that stated this. He's correct on this one as well. It is not grounded. And more than likely, every machine that's going out there is not grounded. Well, one of the easiest fixes for this would be to remove one of the screws that is connecting your power supply to the base and making sure that you've scraped away the paint from the screw, from the base, and put it back in. And now you should have contact between the case of the power supply and the frame. That's number one. The other thing is the brackets, as I had stated. They're not bent to a true 90 degrees, which throws your lead screws way off, causes binding. I think I read somewhere someone talking about a terrible noise when the bed moved up and down. That's because it's binding. I put this up on YouTube that showed this and said, hey, how many people else have this? And it came back that, well, just loosen up a couple of screws on your lead screw nut and that'll take care of the problem. Well, you're fixing the problem with another problem. Doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to you. I don't know. I'm going to show you, I'm not set up like all these other YouTube people. I'm going to show you the issues that I'm having with continuity, with these brackets, and anything else that I come along to with this build. This is my second printer. You can kind of see my junky enclosure back there for my first printer. The first printer was an ANET A8, and truthfully at this point I think the ANET is better made. I hate to say it, but I think the ANET is better made. At least things seem to be square on it. So here we've got continuity between ground and the case of the power supply. Now I go and touch, let's see if I can get a shot of it. I touch the frame right here, and nothing. No sound, no nothing. No continuity. Sorry for the terrible video, but like I said, I'm not set up to do these videos. I don't care anything about doing these videos, but I'm just disappointed with this machine. Okay, so I didn't think of just sticking that in there the last time. Here we are in ground. What I've done is I've gone in and scraped away just a little bit of the powder coating around the base, and I also scraped away a little bit of paint on the screw that connects the power supply. Now we have continuity. That's all it takes. But the company can't make sure that something like that happens. Okay, so here we are with the base. We're just on a table that I had to build this on. It's not on where it's going to be. You can see it's fairly level sitting right there. And I take this level and I put it on this bracket. It's way off. If I put it on the Z-axis, it's right on. So that tells you that this bracket is not bent at 90 degrees. Same thing, other side, right on. It's a little bit better here, but it's still off some. What does that mean in terms of the user? Well, with it like this here, we'll take this one that's really far off. If I move this lead screw, listen to that vibration, that grinding. One, that's going to affect your print. Two, it's going to affect that lead nut over time. Now, if you look down here, and I'm going to kind of just wiggle this back and forth and find the center point. As it stands with the bed halfway down, that's how far off that lead screw is. And I'm going to end up throwing a couple photos in here. I'm going to take this off. I'm going to put a square on it so you can see that it's out of square. Partly for you all and partly for two trees and 3D printers online, because something's got to change. Something's got to happen. All this extra time that I'm putting into building this, because they don't care to make sure their printers are right. Okay, so here it is with a square on there. You can see I'm nice and flush here, but you can see the gap down across there. And it's not a lot. And people say, well, that's not much, not a big deal. But when you look at the length of the lead screw, right now we're looking at approximately 1 millimeter of height change over say 3.25 inches. Now you take your lead screw, which is a nice long lead screw, and throw that into the mix, and you've got quite a bit that's off. Especially when that bed is all the way up at the 0 point. Okay, so I've kind of gone into Fusion and drawn out what my findings were when I put the square across that brace or bracket, whatever you want to call it. I guess it would be a bracket that holds your bed. This is the angle that we're getting. Here's where my square meets up. This is my line that was 3.25 inches long. And here is my 1 millimeter that I am getting for change. So if I go 90 degrees off of there, which is what the lead screw should be to this right here. By the time I go the length of the lead screw, which this 387.35 isn't exactly accurate, I don't have a metric ruler long enough to measure that lead screw, so I've converted from what I found in inches approximately. It's close enough for these issues to kind of show what's going on. But if the bed's at the very top, that lead screw down at the bottom is 4.696 millimeters away from the center of your coupler for your Z-axis motors. So in order for this rod to couple into what would be right here, it has to be moved over. Now, one way is it's going to put pressure on your nut that's all the way up here. But the nut's only going to take so much pressure. The rest of it, this lead screw is going to bend a little bit to couple up in here. This is why some people are having issues with sound, as you saw in my other video, is that nut that's sitting up here on this bracket is being bound. And this super grease that they give you will take care of part of the problem. And I haven't put it on there because, I want this thing right. I don't want to, we'll grease it up and we'll make it work. And same thing, loosen screws. The grease is only going to do so much. You're going to have wear. You're going to have issues with movement on your Z-axis. Rather than the bed being down on the bottom, riding on the top of the thread, now it's going to be bound so it moves possibly so that it's riding on the bottom of the threads. So you're going to have major backlash issues. And yeah, they make a backlash nut, but you shouldn't have to use one. They need to make sure that when they bend these brackets, that they are 90 degrees, not 91, because this is a long distance and it's going to throw it way off. I can take it to my buddy who has a brace and we can go ahead and bend it to the proper 90 degrees. I shouldn't have to do that. It takes away from my time. It takes away from his time. And you people who are out there that don't have a buddy who has a brace that can bend this, you're just kind of blowing in the wind, and Two Trees apparently doesn't care. So how do you fix this? As the home user, there's a couple of ways. I wouldn't suggest it. I'm going to continue the build and get in touch with Two Trees on that. We'll see what other little things I find along the way. Some people say you're being nitpicky, but hey, yeah, it's an inexpensive printer, but I still paid over $300. And by the time I add surround and everything to it, at $500 and some change. Not too far away from the Creality printer at this point. And about the only thing that kept me from going with that and going with the Two Trees is the linear rails and the open source. I don't like being stuck to just one company's programming. I guess that's it for the moment. Okay, so now we have the same lead screw after I've taken some time on the brake to make sure that everything is nice and square, basically. Made sure this bend was at 90 degrees. Same lead screw. No ugly noise, nothing loosened up. It's just making the brace the way it should have been made. Okay, further issues that are going on. These mounting screws were missing for both sides. I had to go out and buy some screws so that I could mount these Z-stops. Now, I decided I was going to go with a glass bed, but while I was trying to decide, I wanted to check and see how level the bed was, and come to find out that even though I've got these tightened all the way down, as you can see, that head's above, that head's above, that head's above the build plate, and that head's above the build plate. Furthermore, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places that wires should be hidden within inside the aluminum extrusion, and I was only sent 3 of these ones already installed. I thought I was going to be able to leave it there. I'm not going to be able to. Since I did all that other stuff, it's now 3 weeks going on that, actually not even going on, it has been 3 weeks, almost every day working on this printer, almost all day long. Since I did all this other stuff, the fan has started making a bunch of noise. I'll show that video. But the guide rails, I started working on those because the X guide rail was bent. I noticed it in prints whenever I got to the middle of the bed. Along the center of the bed, along that Y axis, it was tight, even though my height was set perfect on my corners. I thought maybe it was the bed, put a straight edge across my gantry, and it was bent. The gantry drops 1/2 to 3/4 of a millimeter in the center. And I contacted Two Trees on that, and they wanted me to jump through a bunch of hoops again, and supposedly supposed to be a new rail coming. So I started working on that, and noticed before that there was a little bit of binding on the movement along the Y rails. I looked at those and end up having a brown substance on the side of them, which I figure more than likely is rust. There's nothing else that would cause brown there. Took it apart, flushed it out, cleaned them, re-greased them, going back in the machine, contacted Two Trees, and they said, well, no, that's rust discoloration. Don't believe it is. Told them I'm 100% sure that it is rust, and the only thing that would discolor the grease, or should discolor any decent grease, is an outside source such as rust. Well, then they came back and said, well, you can smell rust. I've never smelled rust. Maybe if I'm in a room full of it and I'm, like grinding on it and there's a bunch of it in the air, I might be able to smell it, but put your nose up against any piece of rust and see if you can smell it. You don't really smell rust. So that's where we're at. I'm at wit's end. As I said, 3 weeks, almost every single day, all day long, working on this from about 9 in the morning until about 4 in the afternoon-ish. It's a lot of hours and a lot of my time lost. And so frustrated with this machine, and so frustrated dealing with Two Trees. To them, I'm just a stupid American. I don't know nothing. Every time I bring up something that's wrong with it, no, it's not that, it's this. Until I send them 5, 10, 15 more pictures. and they say, oh, well, yeah, I guess that is wrong. We'll send you one. I've yet to receive a single thing.